G'day guys, welcome to the latest episode of Beyond the Tape. This one is another tech talk. I know it's been a while, sorry for that, but our lives have been hectic and getting all three of us together sometimes can prove a challenge. This is one we also wanted to do right, and hopefully we have done that for you. Before we jump into it too much though, let me thank some sponsors and supporters that keep this show going. Firstly, Lead Out Sports. Pat down there has been killing it with his supply of vouchers and gift cards for the people that win the best questions. So $100 to whoever goes out and asks a good question. He does a bunch of stuff like Pedro's and Abbey Tools and Smooth Lube, etc. All the cool shit. So if you want to check out his brands, go down to leadoutsports.com.au. And if you want to win a voucher for that rad web store, ask us a good question. As well as those guys, we have our usual supporters, Taylor Trails, who is Tassie's specialist for statewide transfers, private group shuttles, and all-inclusive packages for when you want to get down to Tasmania and experience some of the best trails in the world. FE Sports are among leading industry experts when it comes to sporting product imports, distribution, and customer service, both in Australia and New Zealand. They're the official distributors for a bunch of brands like 100%, Pirelli, and Wahoo, and I love all their stuff. Honestly, it's some of the best kit I've ever worn, and man, those tires are gripping like no other. NS Dynamics are Australia's premier suspension service centre in Australia. They've been doing this for over 20 years, and they'll get your bike running better than you. Get those Pirellis and suspension service from NS Dynamics, and you won't have to worry about a slippery route anymore. Frank's mountain bike apparel have been killing it lately. I love their new collection, especially for their juniors with a bunch of tie-dye and bright colours. They're one of Australia's premium mountain bike apparel companies, and they create some pretty cutting edge lightweight jerseys and some damn good downhill pants. Two Up Bike Co are the importer of Noble Wheels, Factor Components, and DuPont lubricants. They offer some of the best kind of niche products you can possibly get. I love the pedals that I've got from Factor and the hubs as well. Like, they not only look bling, but damn, they make a bike ride better than normal. Dirt Surf mud guards keep all the mud out of irons. They're made from 100% recycled materials and are 100% recycled. So they leave next to no carbon footprint as you leave a tire print while shredding in the mud. Crush Oz keep my bike, my kit, and sometimes me clean. 100% Australian made cleaner and degreasers. They're the best in the business, so hit them up if you want to clean your bike. And Fist Gloves make the best gloves ever. That's pretty much all I need to say. Chapter 17 just dropped, and there are some sick prints in there, so I can't wait. And a special shout out to Andy at Etnies for sending me some shoes during the week. Love your work, mate. And yeah, if you're riding flats, definitely get on some of those Etnies, and there may or may not be something coming in the future. Just keep an eye out. Anyway, this is the one you've all been asking for, the CentreHub. We don't really introduce it. We just delve in from where we were chatting, and I hope you enjoy the episode. As usual, grab a beer, grab a water, grab a wine, grab whatever makes you happy, and enjoy.
The content you've been putting out for it is fucking awesome. That chain line adjustment, the chain line thing for me is the coolest bit of that.
Really?
Yeah, well, not the coolest bit, sorry. Not the coolest bit. The coolest bit's obviously the way it works. But
no, I know what you mean.
Like the fact you thought of that is epic, because I see so many chain line issues on bikes. It's not funny. More on road than just mountain bike, but I do see people using the wrong offset rings.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It's fucking sick.
A lot of, I think, like, you know, I've never been a bike mechanic, and I see a lot of people running the wrong offset, and I'm like, fucking hell. Like, if I was a bike mechanic, surely you'd see so much of this shit. And that's where, you know, people talk about efficiency. I mean, we should probably be recording this, but people talk about efficiency and all of that, and it's like, whoa, like, don't worry about if you're running fucking XX1 or whatever. If your chain line's all whack, then all the rest is redundant.
Yeah, like it's not. And like the other thing too is like the offset, because that's adjustable, you can tailor in the offset really to what you're. So like Shran will recommend a 3 or a 6, right? And that's assuming that your bottom bracket's in the right place. So like I've had
right.
frames where like there's been overspray, and this is on road, and then the shell's been out by like a mil. So then you have to actually offset everything in a bit more. So you can just do that with this. Like it would be hard to eye it off. It's not like there's a measurement where it's like this goes down this line. Well, there kind of is, but it'd be hard to measure. But you could tailor
so
it in really well.
The early ones that I did, which it was just too hard to do in production numbers, but the early ones that I did, I've actually got this written in my patent spec. The early ones that I did had 1 mil etches along the whole thing, so you could just slide the spider across, and it was like you just count like, you know, because it's 18 mil wide, so I just had 17 etches. Which that was pretty. It was cool. But yeah, you could get it dialed in that way for sure.
Yeah, either way, well, because now you've got like little spacer things. I think that would be easier.
The spacers are good. The spacers are good because it also acts as another bearing seal. Anyway, we should probably start recording, Darren.
I was just going to say we should just keep going because it's pretty much been recording this whole time. So
the spacer is good because it acts as a second bearing seal. Because if you get dirt in it, it's going to come in. It's going to come from the inside. So yeah, having that second bearing seal is really good, because, you know, I think the biggest thing, and this goes for anything, but particularly with the front hub or any hub that uses a Sprag clutch, I should say, is the thing that'll fry it, that'll kill it, is contaminants. So, you know, it's as simple as like I've never pressure washed my bike with the hub on. Like I've taken it off before. Like, don't get me wrong, like you can pressure wash it, but just don't blast the hub. Then you kind of defeats the purpose of pressure washing a bike. So I just take it off, because, you know, it's an expensive Sprag, and I don't really want to fuck it off.
Well, like I use pressure washer when I can. I wouldn't say all the time, I definitely do. But I feel like for most people, you do it in the right way. And I'm the same because I've always had power meters. I'm always a little bit apprehensive. Like they are waterproof, but I am not super keen on like railing that thing into it. You know what I mean? So I think it'll just come with this. Like you should be doing the same thing with your hubs, right? Like, you know, realistically. Pressure washers is an interesting one. Like it's the same with forks. If you spray your forks with it, it'll kill your forks.
That's exactly right. Like I've just, I'm a big believer in just don't get that pressure washer anywhere near it, because the nature of how you seal a unit like that is maybe a little bit different to how you'd seal like a normal rear hub in the way of the Sprag. So like, to the point, it certainly doesn't hurt to have that offset spacer as a second bearing seal as well. Definitely helps.
Can you take them apart? But can you? You probably put something up that I probably missed it. But can you take it apart and service a Sprag clutch? Like, is that something you can clean out yourself?
No. But what we've got on the web store is replaceable clutch units, so you can just buy the whole clutch unit.
Yeah.
So they're one of those things you just don't pull apart, because for what it's worth, like to buy the internals of it, you might as well just buy the clutch unit. Yeah.
I'm a fan of that. I know some people want to do the whole like fix it thing, but it's the same as shifters, right? Like you can take a shifter apart. Like, and I have taken shifters apart, but I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to anymore.
You know, the first time I ever met you, I'd actually taken my own shifter apart and I couldn't get it back together, and it was at Bright Nationals, and I took it just to the Shram tent, and I'm like, this is fucked. And you're like, dude, you shouldn't be taking this apart.
Any like GX one, and they just like explode in your hand?
Yeah, well, that's what it was. But back to the Sprag clutch thing. I mean, like, you can service them for sure. Like I've pulled them apart, of course. And when I was sort of prototyping it, I was going through a whole different bunch of ways, working out how the best method of manufacturing was going to be. And like, we were doing some wild stuff in the early days. And just the nature of a Sprag clutch and the tolerances and whatever isn't as easy as servicing, say, a normal Paul and spring clutch. Like, you have to be really, really accurate with, for one, like you have to use a specific type of grease, which is super, super expensive. And the
Really?
amount that you use is, yeah. It's made
What
by
sort
a
of grease is
company.
it?
It's made by a company called Kluber. So
Making
it's
this
a
up.
Isoflex Spec A18, I think it is. I haven't used it in years. I've still got like a big one at home because I was using so much of it in the original methods we're making them with. But that's a grease you got to use, so that's very, very expensive. So like say with Onyx, who use a Sprag Clutch in their rear hub, to get them like you can service them, but it really pays to go to like an Onyx dealer to get it done.
Yeah, okay. It's the same for most hubs, right? Like it's not like you're gonna pull apart your Chris King.
Yeah, Chris King.
Yeah, it's like a full
well,
full Sprag Clutch grease. This is cool.
yeah, it's specific Sprag Clutch grease.
So how's like a Sprag Clutch work? Just out of interest.
So basically what it is, it's like overlies cams. So, oh shit! Actually, do you want me to show you? Got one.
100%.
Always keen to see your bearings, mate.
I so want to have a beer right now, but I'm trying to not drink in the week, and I'm tonguing for it.
I don't drink that often, but today's just been one of those days. I'm like, I fucking need a beer.
I had that yesterday. I had a pint actually of Carlton.
So
it took me 2 hours. So let's go to the clutches. Yes.
No, that's all right. So that's a Sprag Clutch. Not sure how accurate the image is going to be, but like it's each little, it's just got cams. Each like little bar there is a cam. So it's got a leading edge. So I'll put it on a race. It's quite easy to get it on. You've just got to like rotate them in their freewheeling, like overrunning position, and they'll go on. This is why you don't pull them apart. So that's on a race now. Try to line that up.
Oh, yeah.
But basically, like so that's the overrunning direction. It's hard to tell without an outer race on it, but that's the overrunning direction. And you probably can't see it, but the cams sort of tilt over. They just run like a bearing, so it'll run like really free. But in the other direction, they'll stand up on their leading edge, and the cam will jam between the inner and the outer race, and it's not going anywhere. Like it's
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to be able to. I haven't done this before, but yeah, you can see them rock. So yeah, the tolerances you're talking about are super, super tight. I've got one. I've got a fully assembled one here, but I probably can't articulate it that well. But like, so that's spinning,
yeah,
and like that's locked, and it's instant. There is no slop at all. Like I can't explain until you picked one up, but it's like on or it's off. It's and yeah, it's just those little cams sort of that way. But yeah, it's just those little cams at work. So overrunnings that way, so they'd be freewheeling and then jamming up.
So they're all pushing in on that inner race at the same time to create extra friction and pressure, right?
The inner and outer. So
yeah.
You can't really see it because it's got the cage there, but like they're symmetrical. So the same forces apply to the inner and the outer. So yeah, once they stand up on their little feet, it's on.
So it's almost like it's clamping down on that inner race and expanding that outer race.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
That makes a lot of sense in my head now because I had no idea how it would work.
It makes sense with the wear thing and the grease as well. It also makes a lot of sense with the type of grease too now.
Yeah. Like it has to be able to slip well. Otherwise, it's not so much like it has to slip well, like it'll slip well. It's just that, it needs that right grease, I guess, so the tolerance is that there's nothing restricting it from standing up, like the cams to stand up. Like they're a really neat little unit. Yeah, that's the big thing with the Kluber grease. So it's like, it's very, very heat specific, or like very heat tolerable grease and whatever, like can handle high RPM. And like the RPM on a bike really isn't that high at all comparative to other forms of machinery. But like they're really powerful. They're used a lot in elevators and whatever as like a backstopping clutch. So as like a fail safe. So like in the elevator, when it's running up the cable, it'll be in its quote unquote like freewheeling position, like overrunning. But if something were to happen, it's a backstop, so it'll jam up, so your lift, like your elevator, won't fall. Like they're a real powerful little unit for sure.
Why'd you go down that?
You onto? Oh, sorry. Here you go.
Oh, you go down.
I think that was the same question.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same wavelength there.
I was just saying, where? How did you find that? Like, what drew you to that design to use it?
For sure. So the BMXers will know that Onyx in BMX are huge, and Onyx hubs use Sprag Clutch. I was just full BMX days, like, never really ridden a mountain bike when I first saw Onyx for the first. Well, I'd seen a lot of people using Onyx hubs, and I was like, what is this shit? And then a lot of the pros started using them, like Sam Willoughby was running them and whatever, and I was like, well, there's something to this. And then Stealth also had a roller clutch as well. And they were good, but then Onyx, like a lot of guys started running Onyx over Stealth. And then I was like, there must be sort of something to this. And then the first time I actually like felt one for myself was at Chula Vista in California. I forgot what the race was, but it was at the Chula Vista Olympic Training Center, and Onyx were there, like with an expo tent and whatever. And being an engineering student at the time, I'm like, I've heard about these, you use a Sprag clutch, blah, blah, blah. But I never really felt a Sprag clutch for myself before. And like picked one up, like just like I did with that one there. And I was just like blown away. Like I thought they were fucking me around. I'm like, no, like you can't have instant engagement. Like how the fuck does that work? Like it's impossible. And the thing is as well is that when it's in its like overrunning position, like when it's freewheeling, it's literally just a bearing. It acts like a bearing. So you don't have like with a well, I shouldn't, like the cams aren't rolling over like a bearing, but it's very, very low friction, put it that way.
Yeah.
Like a roller clutch is more of that type. Like I don't know specifically. You might be able to get better rolling efficiency out of a roller clutch. Not 100% sure, but like they both work the same type of principle. But point being is like with a ball and spring, like you've always got contact of the spring reacting around the ratchet. Whereas this is like super low friction. So when you spin it, it just feels like a normal bearing, but then it'll just kind of grab. So I thought they were having me on. I was like, what in the fuck is this? Like incredible. And then what I want to make, because this is what they had, and they've got you can find a couple of pictures of them on the internet, but Onyx made up a few hub shells and axles and whatever out of Perspex, so you could see through it. It was all see-through.
Oh, yeah.
And you could see the Sprags in there. And like I was playing with the Perspex model and I was just blown away. I was like, holy fuck, like this is unreal. And then it was kind of at the same time, I'll go back a step. Like I did my VCE, like what was it? visual communication and arts or whatever the topic was, but I did like that unit was on this exact thing. So this dates back to like 2011, like goes way back. But at the same time of meeting the Onyx guys was when I was starting to muck around with like this is a real thing, like trying to make it and whatever. And then like pretty well at that point I was like, we have to use a Sprag clutch. Like this has taken over the world of BMX. Mountain bikers really haven't cottoned onto the whole Sprag thing yet. Like it's got to be a Sprag. And then outside of just me thinking how cool Sprags are, the main reason that you want to use a Sprag as like with a front freewheel is that, and I've kind of highlighted this a few times before, is that if you were to take just your normal freewheel from your back hub and put it at your crank, is that you do have an increase of friction equal to that of the chain, because your chain's always spinning. So you've got an increase in friction. So what you really want to do is try to offset that increase in friction as much as you possibly can. And the way you do that is with a really, really free sprinting front clutch. So we did a whole heap of independent tests and whatever, and this is kind of backed by what Onyx kind of say as well, is that with a Sprag, like you can have up to a 5-fold increase in rolling efficiency of a Sprag compared to that of a normal pawl and spring. So yeah, that was the main reason why I wanted to use them, because I'm like, well, if you just, like what other brands have done, you've just got your freewheel and put it at your crank, you're going to have a net increase of friction because your chain's always rolling. So how do you offset that as much as possible? Use a really free spinning front freewheel.
That's rad, because yeah, the only time it could have inefficiencies is when you're not pedaling, because it's locked in when you pedal. Yeah, that's sick. What's the engagement feel like? Like, is it like, I've never ridden an Onyx hub and I do really want to, and I've had friends that, but is it, you know, like when you get the engagement on a rear hub and it's real like that, like, is it like that, or because it's so instant, it's just like, it's just on, you don't really feel it? Like,
it's just on or off. And the thing is, because a Sprag is silent too, like there's no like, you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't hear it. Like there is no difference. And that's why I think, like I've got on my road bike and I rode road this morning, and yeah, like my housemate went with me and he was kind of behind me and took a video of it and whatever. And he was kind of even blown away, because there is no, from the rider's point of view, it's kind of this continuous motion of riding. Like you don't feel like there's a difference between coasting and pedaling. It's just when you want to pedal, you just start pedaling. And when you want to stop, you just stop. And like, it's just very free flowing, which I really like. And, you know, to take that to a mountain bike sort of thing, like other than climbing, like I honestly can't remember the last time I shifted gears while I was pedaling. Like this, it just doesn't make sense.
Is
like, why would you?
This is what got me excited, because I remember riding a 0 years ago and you can shift while you're riding.
Oh yeah.
And then I'll have to talk off topic with this, but I've got a road bike project I'm hoping to do for handmade, which this will work with. The only issue I had before is power meter wouldn't work with it, but now there's a rival power meter spindle. We can get that all to work. But the shifting while riding thing, like especially like for mountain bike, that's huge, massive. But even like road crits and stuff, like that's massive. Like to be able to do that XC.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine brought up cyclocross. I've never done cyclocross, but he's like, dude, you need to get this in cyclocross, because that'd be, you know, like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
you know,
except
but
for the jet washing. There's heaps of jet washing.
Oh, yeah. I can take the fucking thing off. I'm serious when I say it to people. I'm like, it's 2 seconds to take it off to power wash it. Just take it off. You know.
I'm keen to see a video of you with how you take this off, because I can't really picture how it's that quick and easy.
Well, it's not that, but you got to take the crank off. But like, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Or just be gentle.
It's not the end of the world.
But yeah. look, that's a precautionary thing coming from the manufacturer. I mean, manufacturers always put, you know, do not remove this bolt on your derailleur or whatever, but guaranteed you do. I'm just saying it to.
Do not bolt it into the middle of a frame for your axis derailleur.
Yeah, that's it. No, but someone was asking me the other day about chain efficiency and stuff like, oh, does your chain wear out like super quick? And short answer is no. Like it's comparable to normal. It probably wears out a little bit quicker because it's always spinning, but it's not the ridiculous interval by any means. And I think half the reason why is you're not crunch shifting. Like, and when I say crunch shift, that's my own sort of terminology. But crunch shifting is where like say you're riding downhill and you're like, oh shit, I'm going to need to be in a lighter gear soon or a heavier gear. So you bash down and just know that when you jump on the pedals, it's just going to rip the derailleur sideways.
Yeah.
That's super, super hard on your equipment, your derailleur and your chain alike. Whereas if you're not doing that, then, you know, that prolongs the life of things a lot.
Oh, that's why like chain life's got so much better on mountain bikes when I went from 2x to 1x, because that front shift is so aggressive, you know what I mean? And it's the same thing on the rear. I think that's a massive feature. Like obviously you have to change your riding style to utilize it, which I'm sure everyone would, but 100% you get more chain life. And then like the chain life thing is always running, like chain wear has way more to do with power than it has to do with the thing spinning. And that's why, you know what I mean? Like if you've got big dudes commuting every day and they're putting 300 watts through the thing all the time, they're going to wear their chain out faster. So yeah, I've never even thought of worrying about chain wear.
No, it's why BMXs change their chain so often.
Yeah.
And the other thing is why they ran in chains is because a BMX, like if you run a brand new chain, like first race, it's just going to fucking stretch the whole way around the track.
Oh yeah. They stretch.
So yeah, that's kind of chains. Oh yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what got on the Sprag tangent.
What are the downsides of a Sprag clutch?
Good question. They're expensive.
Yeah,
they're very expensive. The tolerances are very, very tight. Like you have to get the tolerances good. I remember actually Onyx saying to me, it was a few years later after I met him for the first time, I was at Interbike in the States and they remembered me. And I was like, I thought that was pretty cool. And I'm like, oh, I've got this project I'm kind of mucking around on and whatever. And they're like, oh, like, does it slip? And I'm like, no, it doesn't slip. And they're like, well, if you've got it to a point tolerance-wise where it doesn't slip, like you're 99% of the way there. And I found that interesting. And that's kind of true, is that like the tolerances are very, very important with a Sprag clutch. So that's where, you know, why hub manufacturers, I guess, aren't pumping out a whole heap of Sprag clutches is because partly the reason why they're so expensive is you've got to invest in the machinery and whatever to get those tolerances good. The other thing is, which isn't a downside in my case, but what's a downside because we're running such a large diameter. But one of the downsides in a regular rear hub with running a Sprag clutch is because, just for layman's terms, call the Sprag in your rear clutch like 25 mil diameter. You've got to have a few of them wide to be able to handle the torque requirement, which means you add weight. So Onyx hubs in the rear are actually quite heavy. For most guys, it's worth it. You know, like a lot of BMXs where weight is everything, they still say, well, that instant engagement and the almost like frictionless roll is worth everything to me. So, you know, I'll run a little bit extra weight. With us, because we're running such a large diameter, the weight really isn't any different as to whether it would be a pawl and a spring or a Sprag. But yeah, definitely a downside in a normal rear hub is the weight. But yeah, other than that, they're pretty good.
They're a massive hub shell on those Onyxes as well, which makes sense so now if there's multiple.
Yeah. They have mucked around with them a fair bit. Like I remember, it might even be like, I mean, what's cool is if you go onto Onyx you can see like all of their spec sheets and whatever about what they run, and like their hubs are different per like the riding category. So you can get like Onyx hubs for mini, like for expert riders or whatever, so like 10-year-olds, and they come with like a torque limit on them. So, you know, so if you're very powerful at all, like you would make it slip, but they're just trying to get the weight down, use minimal sprags, whatever. And it also, like, the less sprags that you use, the less friction you've got as well, of course. So yeah, like Onyx have done a really, really good job, particularly in the BMX world. I don't know why more mountain bikers don't run them. Like Cam Zink and Kyle Strait run them, which a lot of people don't know. And Bal Warren, he runs them. But yeah.
It's interesting that those guys,
to be honest.
Yeah. But you can't count the points of engagement in a Sprag clutch.
No, it's infinite. Yeah, no, it's infinite. Yeah, and like when
it'd be interesting if they partnered with. Yeah,
you're right, Lockie. No, you're right.
I was saying, it'd be interesting if they partnered with having complete wheels. Like I'm just looking at their website now. It looks like it's just hubs. I could be wrong. It might do wheels somewhere, but you know, I mean, it's just that extra step. You know, I gotta get the hub and I gotta get it built. You know what I mean? Like building wheels is not an easy job.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's part of it.
I think the first time that I ever
bike co in Queensland do it with their Noble rims. Just saying.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty sick. So what was I gonna say?
It's so funny watching
the dog's causing a ruckus.
What were you saying?
She's not allowed on the couch.
The first time I ever actually rode
barbarian.
Yeah, the first time I ever rode a Sprag clutch for myself was a friend of mine here in Geelong. He's been an Onyx fan for years, and they had all their bikes decked out with Onyx. And I rode his daughter's GT one night, and it was like just after this trip to America, like where I first saw him, whatever. And I was blown away with two things. And first of all, like the first thing I noticed was the gate start, because like on BMX, obviously, like you roll, you cranks back, and you've kind of got a set foot position that you like to have. Mine's fairly neutral, like back and front foot are pretty well parallel to the gate. And the first thing that I was just blown away with is like, I always ran profile hubs when I raced BMX, and like it was always incremental. Like you'd have to, like, you'd look down and be like, yeah, that's about right. But then a lot of the time you might be like half a click out. So like you would kind of like just bunny hop the back wheel on the gate with a bit of pressure, just trying to like spin the wheel just that half a degree to get it perfect. And that was just like a thing that I developed, and a lot of BMXs developed doing in BMX, is just that skip of the wheel on the gate, just trying to get your foot in the perfect position. Whereas with Onyx, like you could literally just backpedal and just be like, yep, there it is. And it was just on. Like even when you applied front pressure, there was no like clunk until it grabbed. Like it was just like there. So I thought that was really trippy. And then, so gate dropped, went down, and then I manualed the first jump. And I remember being like blown away because I felt like I was going to loop out, because it felt like but it felt like you accelerated, because like with a normal hub, as soon as you do a manual, you're weighting up that rear hub, like you're putting a lot of friction on it, whatever, and it wants to kind of bind. So if it spins really freely, it almost like, you don't, on a normal hub, you don't know that you're kind of slowing down, because you just, like, that's all you've ever felt. So anything better than that would almost feel like you're speeding up. And I remember manual the first jump and felt like I was accelerating. I was like, holy shit, like what is going on here? And rode back up to the starting. I'm like, no, give me my other bike back, because if I ride this anymore, I'm going to have to buy one. So yeah, that's really why the Sprag Clutch front freewheel really grabbed my mind, because I was like, in my opinion, like front freewheels are fantastic for the benefits that I said. But I think, yeah, what really caps any clutch off is a Sprag or a roller clutch. I think they're awesome.
So why did you decide to chuck it on the front?
Well, yeah, the obvious thing is you can pedal, like you can change without pedaling. So you can change gears whenever you want, as long as your back wheel's moving. So if you're fully locked up, the back wheel, obviously your chain's going to be static, but you're not really fully locked up that often. So yeah, you can change gears anytime. It helps isolate some of the suspension forces from your crank, which is really powerful. And then there's a few more kind of peripheral things too that I think a lot of people kind of haven't talked about, which is sort of really important. And one being, if you imagine, and it's hard to kind of, when you normally ride, you don't notice it. Like I was saying about the manualing thing, because you're just so accustomed to that's how a bike feels. Is you imagine you come around a corner or something, and hang on, I'm going to take these headphones off. They're giving me the shits. You imagine if you come around a corner and you go to, like, you're not pedaling, come out of it, and then you jump back on the pedals. Is that when you jump back on the pedals, like, you've got all the weight of the drivetrain to get going again. Whereas with the front hub, all that's already moving. So when you jump back on the pedals, it's like your pedals are trying to catch the drivetrain now. So it's easy. Whereas with the conventional system, you're trying to get all that moving. So the first time I rode it, I was like, whoa, like it just feels so much easier to get going, which then leads into, I actually run a taller gear, like a heavier gear most of the time, because to get it moving again isn't so hard. So I can afford to be in a heavier gear. So I thought that was kind of really interesting. Another one, like it's a smaller effect, but I think it's more stable as well. I mean, you've got an extra gyroscope, like you've got two wheels moving around the whole time, but now you've got your drivetrain moving forward. So it is an extra gyroscope. So I think it's, a little bit more stable, but
I would love to see the power saved. Like, I always end up talking about road shit on here, and I shouldn't, but like,
go for it.
Crit as well, but just like that, getting the drivetrain going, like, you get out of the saddle and pedal. It'd be so sick to see how much that adds up. Like, obviously, the reason I speak road is because you can do it for over an hour and actually get something pretty big. If you got that on a downhill run, it'd be pretty minimal. But that's super interesting. Like, that's really cool.
And I think like second to that too is because it's instant engagement. Whereas like, a lot of people say, oh, instant engagement, like, so what? And I'm like, well, even if it takes 100th of a second to engage, but you're going from coasting stage to pedaling stage 100 times in a race, well, that's a second at the finish line. And you're going from those stages way more than 100 times in a race. You might be going, depending on the race, of course, but if you're doing like a long enduro or XC or whatever, you're going to be doing that thousands of times. So the hundreds of seconds each engagement start to add up really fast.
I think
the marginal gain thing's massive, like huge.
Yeah, and the drivetrain on a mountain bike is so much heavier. Like, if you think about how much power you'd save on a roadie, like, you're gonna 10 times that easily, right? Like, especially like a light climbing wheel compared to one of mine. Like,
yeah, for sure. And look, the argument, like, in the way of like converting your current rear hub to just locking it out, not so much the case. But where I want to get to with it is that basically I want to make just a fixed rear hub. So it's literally a front hub just with the cassette just machined straight into the hub shell, because then you're reducing a shitload of weight out of your rear wheel, and any weight that you would have had in a clutch mechanism is now on the sprung body. So for suspension performance, it's gonna work so much better. But yeah, basically what you'd have is a hub shell just with 2 bearings instead of 4, because you don't need 2 to support the driver and 2 to support the hub now.
Ooh.
You just run 2 bearings, cassette machined straight into, like, imagine like an XO1 cassette that's machined as one part of the hub shell body. That might get a little bit confusing because you want to run different materials, but like even if it was 2 that were bonded together or something, but like your rear hub could be so light. So that's the stage where I want to get it to. I've kind of wanted to get the hub out there first and then work on that stuff later, because that's an accessory to it, I think.
But even like if you machined the like XD free hub or the microspline free hub onto the hub shell, it's still going to save bearings and a fair bit of weight, right?
I'd be way more into that because of the whole me not mixing drivetrains and being annoying about that. But that's sick. I was about to ask that, like, is the plan to release your own hub? So I think that makes a lot more sense, and you just buy it as a package, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And like, you know, there'll be people that just want to buy the CentreHub by itself just to keep the cost down a little bit. But for sure, like if you want to have the whole drivetrain solution, then, you know, I think that would be a cool solution as well. You know, like I went to the extent a couple of years ago of like, I had DT Swiss hubs and I actually punched out the 2 middle bearings just to get the weight down, just for fun. Because there's a whole heap of spaces and all that you can strip out of the driver and all that shit. Mm. So like, if you really want to go to it with a current DT hub, you can do that as well. But yeah, there's a fair bit of room to move there.
Oh, you could do so much with the bearing placement to like make that hub stiffer and stuff as well. Like you could literally redesign hubs, which sounds silly, but like they are such a weird design when you think about where the bearings are placed for what their purposes are. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, they are. Rear hub is it's quite complicated. Like if you imagine comparing a rear hub to a front hub, they're, you know, very different 2 sets of machinery. Whereas you could literally have just a normal front hub off your front wheel just with a cassette machine into it and be good to go.
Oh, it's so sick. That actually makes me really excited. really, really excited. Will it come in polished? Because this is
dude, I'm the polished king. I love polished.
Yeah, sick. Done.
How does it separate the suspension forces from the drivetrain if it's instant engagement?
Yeah, so this is something I've been asked a lot, and I'm more than happy to explain. The best analogy that I've come up with, and I'm happy for people to come up with better analogies, because I was discussing this with Dave Habich and Sam Brownlee, and I was kind of trying to articulate it, and then I came out with this one. I think it's quite accurate, but the best way to explain it is that, let's say, for instance, in a normal system, like a conventional drivetrain system, let's say your drivetrain is normally sitting at 0 RPM, right? It's static. So when you would hit a bump, if you would hit a bump with you and your back wheel moves up, it wants to tug the chain backwards. So it wants to move the chain back, obviously. So just for layman's terms, call the speed at which it's tugging the chain back -10 RPM. Yeah. So, and you feel that -10 RPM as pedal kickback. With a front hub, the reason it's negated is because, let's say you're moving and the chain's feeding forward, and just, again, it's layman's terms, but let's say the chain's feeding forward at 100 RPM. When you hit that same bump, you're still going to have -10 RPM through the chain. But the thing is, the whole system only slows to 90 now. So you're not going to feel that through your pedals. So what it would require, and again, it doesn't totally eliminate, quote unquote, it doesn't totally eliminate suspension force, because if in the scenario that you were going super slow, so, you know, like the Robbie Madison, the jump that he did on the Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Imagine you did something like that on mountain bike. So imagine if you hucked off a set of stairs or something, but you're going super slow. So you're only going like 2 Ks an hour forwards, and you did a massive drop to flat. So the chain feeding forward, let's say the same example, the chain feeding forward was only 5 RPM, and you hit a bump that caused the chain to feed back at 10, was you're going to now feel a -10 of the chain moving back. So you're going to feel that -5 through the pedals. So it's all relativity. So if you're going super slow and hit a huge bump, you might feel a bit of pedal feedback. But the point being is, and like, I want to get some quantifiable numbers for people just to kind of show this sort of visually. I want to get some animations and whatever as well. But the point being is, on a mountain bike, it doesn't take the forward speed to be very fast before it eliminates any of that chain tug backwards effect. And that depends on what gear you're in, obviously, too, because like a low gear will feed the chain forward slower than in a high gear. So yeah, that kind of depends on how much pedal feedback it would eliminate depending on the size of the bump you hit. But I think that's the best analogy, is you imagine, yeah, it's that relativity thing. So the chain is feeding forward like faster than what the reaction area of your pedal of your wheel, hitting a bump. But in an extreme case, if you did like, and I mean, and the reason I brought up Robbie Madison's Arc de Triomphe thing is that he dropped off that in 4th gear. So you could see him rolling around at the top, and he clicked up to 4th, dropped off. And the reason he almost ate shit was that the bike actually seized up, because he flat landed a bit and the wheel started rolling faster than what the engine in 4th could keep up with. So it actually jammed up. And like in a similar kind of way, that's the scenario I'm using. So if you were to drop off just, if you're rolling only 2 Ks an hour and just dropped off a cliff to flat with the CentreHub, yeah, of course, you're going to feel some pedal kickback, because the chain feeding forward isn't faster than what the reaction area of the rear wheel is coming up.
So you pretty much, you're saying ride fast and you'll be good.
Yeah, ride fast. And that's kind of the oxymoron here, because generally speaking, the bigger the bumps you hit are generally because you're going faster. So, they shouldn't be so much of a concern.
So if you're worried about pedal kickback and you're hucking off roofs, may not be the best product for you, but very niche market, I feel.
Fender is so depressed right now.
Yeah.
But put it this way, it's still not going to be any worse than a normal setup.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, it's always going to be as good or better than a normal setup.
Yeah. I can't think of many people who would care about suspension feedback and massive drops.
Yeah, I've had a few people say that, like, oh, but there would be scenarios where it wouldn't come into play, like that. I'm like, well, yeah, but it's not going to be any worse than a normal setup. Like, you've only got things to gain. So,
yeah. Haters gonna hate.
Yeah, but anyway, like, I won't give away any details, but yeah, I've had a bit of an epiphany only last night with how to make it better too. So anyway, we'll run out. We'll get these first batch out, and we're already into the second batch. But then, yeah, think about working on this next one.
Yeah.
So the rear hub doesn't do the same thing because the wheel is spinning freely and the drivetrain's at 0, right? Just so I'm clear.
Yeah, it's mainly to do with where your clutch is situated, because in the rear wheel is that, it's not isolating the drivetrain forces, because the best way to think about it is, with the clutch at your rear wheel, is that there's something linking your main frame to the rear wheel, which is your chain, that's trying to restrict, that suspension movement happening, pretty much.
I think one of the biggest things with this, and this is changing it as well, with it being on the crank, is there's obviously going to be new crank standards and as much as there's probably going to be new Cub standards, but because of the chainline thing with this, it works on everything. So like, I'm ordering one tonight after this, and it's probably going to start life on just a standard dub. spindle, but now it's going on to a CL55 pretty quickly. I don't need to worry about any of that. But if that was going from a 157, super boost to normal fucking boost or whatever we're at the moment, I would have to buy a whole new hub. So
like,
I'm
put
excited.
it this way, and like I'll be the first. Like when I started making this, like I was a uni student, like I had no money at all. Well, I just come back from America, so I had inverse money, if you want to say that. And like, yeah, I wanted to make a product for myself that wasn't going to be bike specific. Like if I got another bike, once I started earning some money as a graduate or whatever, I could take the clutch with me. So I was like, well, how can I make this as adaptable as possible? Because, and for customers who are in the same situation as me, like I want this to be as adaptable as possible. So it's, it's something that can last you a long time over multiple crank brands and frame configurations and axle widths and whatever. And also, so from a manufacturing standpoint too, like I didn't want to have to manufacture 100 different type of hubs. Like as it stands, we can manufacture the clutches, the spiders and the direct mounts, and then just assemble it as per the customer request. So
I've never seen something as well thought out on the mounting. And when you first sent me the video of it, I was just like, holy shit. Like there's so many different mounting variants, which is the bane of my existence. And this suits them all with that little wedge design thing. I was just like, this is so sick. Like I was pretty pumped. Like it wasn't, I think because also like I hadn't seen any of the background of it before. You're kind of like, oh, here's this thing. I was just like, whoa. Like I've never seen someone think about it in that many ways. And then I think also because generally speaking, a lot of brands probably can't do it that way as well, because not a lot of people sell just a spider, right? But even in power meters, like they're all specific spiders. I've never seen that idea of it just working on everything before.
Yeah, and again, and that's kind of the narrative of WRP too. I guess because I'm not SRAM or I'm not Hope or whatever, I'm not going to make a product specific to my crank. Like, I want to fit it to every crank. Like, there's no agenda there.
But if you look at like power to max or something, you know what I mean? Like they're all specific. Like that's what I mean. Like I'm so surprised we haven't seen that before.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean too. Yeah, of course, good point.
And it makes so much sense. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, that's really logical. It's like, fuck, there must have been some work to sort that all out, and a lot of cranks bought or borrowed.
Well, and this goes down a bit of a rabbit hole, and it's not in no ways chucking those companies under the bus, because they're making it obviously probably an item that might be cheaper than mine, but it all depends how you manufacture this stuff. Because if you're setting up a cast mold, it makes sense to cast them as much of that shit in the same mold as what you possibly can. So a lot of that time, that means the whole spider. Whereas like for me, like I never had, and I still don't have the capital to pour into castings and shit like that. So like I'm CNCing it, or I'm machining it another way to make it work. And the most logical way to do that is if you're doing it the methods which I like, which is, I would claim, sort of authentic methods, then that's the obvious one. So, but yeah, anyway.
No, hats off on that. It was,
Thanks,
complex.
No, I appreciate it. Like I said, I spent a long time thinking about it, like a long time. So, and like kept it pretty well under wraps. Like I didn't really tell anyone. Like you've got no idea how anxiety provoking that it was for like the last 5 years. Like I'd just been pulling my hair out because I'm like, fuck, like I just expect to wake up one morning and look on Pink Bike and someone's bought that out, because I'm like, this is like that, like the mounting stuff that you were just saying to me as an engineer is so obvious. I'm like, fuck, someone's going to do this. And then Dave Habich sent me O-Chain when O-Chain first dropped, and I'm like, oh no. Oh no. And then I looked at how it worked and I was like, oh, it's different. Like, don't worry, like, it's all good. So anyway.
How is yours different from O-Chain? Have you tried this? Their stuff?
I haven't tried O-Chain. No. So O-Chain you know how O-chain works.
Floaty boy.
If I did the
Yeah,
same
so-
hand gesture.
So O-chain in short rotates backwards, whereas ours rotates forwards. So theirs rotates backwards a finite amount just to take up some pedal slop. Ours is constantly rotating forwards.
And yours engages, and theirs is just a
Well, the nature of having something that rotates backwards means that it has to come back to its original starting point. So, yeah, I mean, hats off to them. Like, I think they've got a cool product, and people seem to like it for sure. You know, what you don't have with O-chain, what you do have with ours is ours. You do have that friction of the chain still. While we're trying to offset it with a really low friction clutch, is you still do have the friction of the chain. So like on really flat gradient tracks where you're not pedaling much, which are kind of rare, but like I've got a couple around home, and there are a few tracks where I think it probably would be faster with a conventional drivetrain because you're not pedaling that often, but you're coasting a heap. If you've got any incline really at all, it very quickly checks out. Like, you know, the benefits outweigh the costs for sure. And the nature of a Sprag Clutch too is like that coefficient of friction becomes less the faster you go. So like as soon as you got any gradient, like you're just away. It's just like you've got a bearing between your cranks. But that's the second reason why I made it as a spider, is to your question, is that like, so you can swap it out. Like if there's a track that you're like, fuck, you know, I reckon that a conventional would be better, is that you can swap it out. Like it's no big deal. Even in the case of like, say, Leo Gang world champs where it was like full mudder, is that you might not run a CentreHub in that type of condition because it's always feeding forward. It might just clog up with mud so much that you don't want your chain having to feed through a chain guide, and like you don't want all that mud getting in the way of slowing it down. Just as an example. So in a race like that, you might say, you know what, I just don't want the chance of like, you know, the extra friction. So I'm just going to run a standard setup. So, but yeah, that's half the reason why I made it kind of, like you were saying, Lockie, kind of modular and rebuildable and all that type of stuff is, so if you wanted, you can go to and from a conventional setup or a front freewheel in literally a couple of, like, a minute or 2 minutes or so. So,
well, that's I think it's interesting because a lot of people might think their bike has to be set up once and it stays static, whereas you look at races, they are tweaking and changing things a fair bit.
Absolutely, dude. I mean, you look at Peter Maritzburg or whatever, and guys are racing enduro bikes a couple of years ago. It's like, you know, it's the same thing. Like, you know, I want them to be able to do it. And I think like there are another couple of front freewheel companies out there that make really cool products, like Intent BC, like they're making a really cool product with a pawl and spring. You know, and you've got to buy the whole crank set, which is cool. But yeah, the way I want mine is so you can just swap it out if you want.
Optimize for the conditions. I didn't thought about it with the mud, but that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't run. I've got no issues with O-chain. I think they're pretty cool. But I wouldn't run that on like a trail bike, to be honest. Whereas I would definitely run this on a trail bike, just because of the loading it up and the
I really wanted to test one on a trailie to see what it was like. Trying to find one was a nightmare, so it didn't end up happening. But having that like float almost adds extra engagement in my eyes. Is that what you were thinking, Lockie? Like you got that float to get forward?
Yeah, it's like I feel in my head, and again, I haven't ran one, it would feel, I know you kind of load them up. I was talking to Troy about his, and you don't worry about it too much, but it would feel like I had a really low engagement hub on there, which especially for like climbing and stuff, I don't want that. Like I don't want to go like on the cranks and then it engage. And I'm sure it rides a bit different because you load it up and that. But I do know I do a lot of those little half cranks when I'm climbing up techie stuff, and I just think that would not be very enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never ridden one. I think like they've got a neat little package. I think their distro is really good. Like, not sure about Australia. I know New Zealand's got really good distro and whatever. Yeah, I think they're a cool company for sure. They definitely made me shit myself when I saw them come out in February a couple of years ago.
I saw that.
Like,
and I'm
oh,
like,
no.
God damn it. While we're talking, have you got any other questions about CentreHub, Lockie? I'm trying to think.
No, I think that's kind of it, to be honest.
Nah.
Nah.
Yeah, sick. I think I've got everything. Is there anything we've missed, Mikhail?
Look, mate, there's probably surely things that I've missed. Like I said, I like kind of pretty tired. I've like thought about this stuff a fair bit. So like, there's probably stuff that I've skipped just because. But yeah, I not that I can think of at this point in time. But I know I'll get off and I'll be like, oh, I should have said that. But yeah, I think that pretty well covers it for now.
Slide into the DMs. I just put my order through, so I'll just hound you until it arrives.
Yeah, is it at your door yet, Lockie? It should be there.
Yeah,
right?
where's my product?
Yeah.
Is it going to be here tomorrow?
Yeah, it says in bold there, this is a pre-order only item. Be delivered early next year.
I didn't see that. Oh, wait, no, it is there. CentreHub pre-order. Fine.
We've seen something else.
I think that.
Yeah, that covers it.
Yeah, I think so. If I think of anything else, I'll just dive back to the rabbit hole.
I don't know if you've been living under a rock or not, Lockie, but Mick's also had something else blowing up the internet everywhere. False SRAM bits and stuff.
I get personal updates sent to me from this, and it makes me so happy and so excited.
I get them every couple of days.
I thought it might have been
giving
giving you the shits.
So Mick had kind of talked to me about it at the start, and I had a couple worries just about the road derailleur, and obviously wearing my SRAM hat, like it's hard in the sense of being like, yeah, put a road derailleur on a mountain bike because it's not fit for purpose. So that doesn't hurt me, but it is something I worry about a little bit. But no, it's sick. Like I like those Honda bikes because I really like the merit of a traditional drivetrain in a box, which is obviously what they said it was. I don't think they've ever actually shown it, but gearbox, I'm not a big gearbox person. And it's just because they're complex and hard to service and all that kind of stuff. External drivetrains easy to service. What Mick's doing is doing that with Axis. So you get the beep boop buttons and it's hidden in the frame and there's no cables, which is rad. So no, I'm a big fan. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, we're trying to give it a good nudge. I mean, what I think is really funny is that like it's so this is what I was going to talk about actually, just sort of tweaked back with my mind, is that every product that I work on, and the CentreHub is like this at the nth degree, is like everything that I work on I try to keep really tight-lipped about, because like I don't know, I want it perfect before I tell anyone. I'm like, it's got to be exactly the way I want it, and like nudging on being ready to sell if I say anything about it, because I know if I say something about it, then I'm going to get pressure from people to want to buy it, and it has to be somewhat ready to sell. So that's definitely how I was with CentreHub and some of my other parts. But the gearbox thing was a bit of a passion project, so I've just kind of thought fuck it from the start and just posted everything and like taken people along for the ride. I guess because there's nothing like proprietary in there. Like some patent attorneys might tell you like, oh, dude, you could patent this or whatever, but I don't think it is. I mean, Honda's already done it. Like whatever, it's just standard drivetrain. So there's nothing to cover up. So from the get-go, I've been like, fuck it. Like I'm just going to post it. And I think that's what trips a lot of people out, because like it was on Pink Bike the other day and people are like, oh, why has it got no guards? All this. And I'm like, dude, I've literally spent a couple of days on this. Like, I've literally got the derailleur, 3D printed a hanger and just stuck the fucking thing on and just winged it. the very like the oxymoron here is like I see to that point like a lot of people are like, oh fucking, you know, RIP leg hairs, and I'm like, for 15 years people complained about the fact that Honda closed up their transmission, you couldn't see what was in there. The second we post something that you can see what's in there, you complaining about it not having guards. I'm like, if I had guards on it, you wouldn't be able to see what was in it. But like, anyway, it just kind of made me laugh. But yeah, it's working better than what I expected it to. I mean, the first one that we made, like, it was obvious that I really needed to get that B gap smaller.
Yeah, that freaked me out. I saw that. I was just like, this ain't going to ship good. Like, if that B gap's out like 3 mil, which most of them are from most bike shops, not to sound mean,
Yep.
the shifting's bad. So I was like, ooh. But then the Habich thing of switching the wheels around, that was real smart. I hadn't thought of that. I was like, that's sick. So, but yeah, it's still
that was real smart. Like, that made like, you've got no idea the difference that made. Like, he told me, and I was like, oh yeah, duh, like, of course. But in my head, I was like, oh, it won't matter that much. And swapped them around, and like everything that like was on Pink Bike and whatever wasn't with the wheel swapped around. As soon as I swapped the wheels around, I was like, holy shit, this is so much better. So that was really good. But like, what people don't understand, I guess, I tried to articulate this in the Pink Bike article. I don't think many people actually read the article, just looked at the pictures. But
why would you read?
I don't think many people could read the article. We could phrase it like that. Right?
Back to my pre-order questions. Where's my item?
So they go
Very Pink Bike.
You know, like, the frame wasn't designed around the gearbox. Like, it's a frame. We never had the idea of retrofitting a gearbox to it at all, other than like a pinion, you know, which was it's designed to fit. So when I was kind of toying around with it in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to just like see where things fit. Like, I didn't want to bolt the derailleur where it was bolted on that video that was on Pink Bike. It was literally the only location that it had the room to fit. Like, yeah, of course I wanted the B gap smaller. Like, I'm not an idiot. It was that if it was any smaller, it would be on the shock. Like, I couldn't do it. So like, geometrically, that was the only place it fitted. And like I said, like, I don't know, I was just like, oh, this is kind of cool. I'm just going to post it. And then it just got way, way more traction than what I thought it was ever going to. Like, then when Pink Bike said we want to do an article, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, yeah, okay. But then I also think it might have encouraged, look, I don't know, but it kind of pushed the whole industry along in that realm of things, like with lal bikes and that type of shit. Like, I could be way off the mark, but I thought it was coincidental that like I dropped that, and then like a day later, lal bikes dropped theirs. You know, so I think it's good, just get it out there, show people what you're working on, and then in only, I don't know what it was, Monday, I think it was, yeah. Monday, I just come in, I was like, there's got to be fixed. Like, there's got to be something better about it. And I wanted to isolate the tensioner and the indexer from the cassette, from the derailleur originally, kind of do what lal bikes are doing. So like, have the derailleur just with the indexer cog on it, and then have the tensioner off the frame somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you'd have the two independent circuits. And then it was like, well, if you did that, you could have the indexer on the part of the chain before the cassette and the tensioner after the cassette. So I started ripping off the tensioner off the derailleur and all that type of shit. And then, I don't know, it kind of got a little bit wild there. Like, I had heaps of reiterations going. Like, that poor Trinity looks like fucking cheddar cheese at the moment. It's just got drill holes all through it. Like, because I was mounting the derailleur all over the place trying to get that thing to work. And it was late, like really late, Monday night. And Oh, that's right, Lockie. I sent you a picture or whatever. I was like, I took the limiter screw out of the tensioner to try to make shit work. So I was basically running the tensioner like all the way off, but trying to get a heap out of it to try to get back like under the cassette and all that. It wasn't working. So I put that screw back in. So I went back to just like fully stock derailleur. And I was like, fuck, like if you mount it upside down and like pull a heap of tension into it, you could get it wrapping around technically the tensioner, but that's got the indexer cog on it now. So that's acting as your indexer to the cassette. Then to the normal indexer that's now got your tensioning cog on it, and basically run the same hypothesis. So you've got the tensioner and the indexer broken by the cassette, like the cassette's in between that circuit. And worked way better than I thought. Like it's super, super crisp because you're running a heap of tension.
So close as well.
And it's so close. And what it's doing is because the cassette's technically in the middle of the derailleur, is that when the derailleur moves, it's forcing the chain to move up that cassette. Like it's not giving it any other option because it's pushing it and pulling it, if you know what I mean, from above and below. It's just pulling it across. So like the shifting is super, super crisp. Whereas normally it's like you're only tugging it from the bottom. It's got nothing pulling it from the top. It's just, you know what I mean? So
yeah, that's sick. I'm a fan. I'm a fan in the sense, again, it's not fit for purpose because the road derailleur, but it's just normal parts. Like, I don't know if we're going to dive into some of the gearbox questions. It's like my only real downside of gearboxes besides weight is just parts, like stock, because it's just not the norm, right? And the last thing you want to do is get stuck. And obviously not every bike park is going to stock an axis derailleur, but you'll be more likely to find one of those. You will be like, you know, a new pinion unit or whatever.
For sure. And like, you know, for the same reasons as the CentreHub things that I just brought up, I'm a big fan of either using stock parts or at least having it adaptable to stock parts. You know, I think I'm like, don't get me wrong, I'm a big proprietary fan, like, you know, make proprietary stuff all the time. But I think like as a scalable, sellable item for the general consumer, it has to be adaptable. It's like, it's no point having the best phone on the planet if you can't download the photos to your PC. You know what I mean? Like,
if you can't charge it because there's no cord.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Could you theoretically use a mechanical derailleur on that system as well?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So the original one, this is something that I never posted because I was like hell bent on the axis thing. So going back to Australia Post and anyway, I won't go into it, but that axis derailleur. So this project was like, the gearbox project was meant to be done and launched like probably a month before it was. It was the fact that axis derailleur was stuck in the post. So what I did all the modeling and whatever on was my mechanical Saint derailleur. So I had it all jigged up and whatever with the Saint stuff. Obviously, it was a little bit different because the Saint derailleur is geometrically a bit different to the axis. But like it was close enough to feel it out. What was I going to say? But yeah, like 100% you could use it with mechanical derailleur. The axis makes it so easy because like I was saying, like you can turn the frame to cheddar cheese and put that derailleur anywhere you want and just like click it and it doesn't matter where it is. So it's so handy for prototyping in that regards. You're not having to cut 100 cables. But yeah, absolutely, you could run on a cable.
I feel thinking about it now, like going back to CentreHub, not to go on a tangent, but I feel I'm more stoked now to try that with axis than I would be with mechanical because it's so easy that I'm not trying to do an axis ad, but it's like you click through gears way more because it's the button, right? You're not like pushing that shift in. I'm just going to be shifting all the time riding around on that thing.
Dude, yeah, like I don't want to sound I don't know what the word would be. Like I don't want to pump up my own product. But like, and it goes for the same with any front hubs, is I don't think, like, you don't realize how clunky a normal drivetrain is until you ride a front hub.
Yeah.
Like when you jump on it, it feels totally natural because it's just, you know, you've got more ability. So it's just like, oh, this is cool. But then when you go back to a conventional drivetrain, it's like, whoa, this is clunky as. Like, you mean I can only shift when I'm pedaling? Like I said, like, I honestly, other than climbing, I can't remember the last time I shifted when I was pedaling. Just don't do it. It doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think, well, I hope to, but I think you'd be surprised.
And then you had that gearbox set up with a CentreHub as well, didn't you? Because the first ones I saw was spider based.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
so
the
you can set
chainline
up.
video.
Yeah. So you can set it up with both. That's really not an issue at all. You can set it up with both. Like I said, for the same reason, like drag and all that type of shit, like it might be better to run it without the CentreHub. I don't know, but like for now, I think that to unlock all the features, I think it'd be really cool. And there's no reason why, like, because we're using all conventional drivetrain parts and chains and whatever, there's no reason why it won't be just as good with CentreHub. So yeah, I'm really excited to put it to the test. And yeah, I don't know, gearboxes are really cool. I think that I think that current drivetrain stuff, and I'm sure you can attest to this through SRAM stuff too, Lockie, but like current drivetrain stuff is so good. It really is. Like, say with Axis, and that's the main reason I want to use Axis, because I truly believe Axis is the future of where stuff's going. Drivetrain stuff is so good and so efficient. It's just its location that lets it down. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it's hanging off your rear wheel.
It is weird. I think about it a lot. Like it's the same way those Santa Cruz valves came out the other day, right? Like Presta valves. It's just been the same thing since forever, and everyone's okay with it. I think that's kind of where drivetrain is. Like, I don't have a big issue with it, but when you do think about it, at least for mountain biking, like it's in a really shitty spot. It's just the way that it is. It's the way the frames are set up, right? But it's like that thing is just a magnet for rocks. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey guys, I'm going to smash into you. Like, but it's just how it's been. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. I like normal drivetrain because it's good and because there's spare parts for it. And the downside to gearboxes is it doesn't have that and the weight and stuff. But it is weird. We've just kept doing the same thing for so long.
Yep.
I did laugh when people said that your gearbox was so much more like what you're doing was so much more complicated than a normal drivetrain. I was like, it's literally the normal drivetrain just moved. Like, I'm so blown away by that.
The one that I laughed at, like I had to chuckle at, was the weight thing, because obviously I didn't read the article, but like the weight, and like don't get like this version 2 will be really, really light. Like compared, like version 1 was kind of a little bit bulky just because of where stuff we're at, and like we had pretty bulky jack shaft and all that type of shit. And I can't remember the exact figures, but it was about 300 grams that it added. But the thing is, it decreased the unsprung mass by about half a kilo. And that's a figure you really got to look at. So that's a whole nother topic in of itself. But limiting the unsprung mass is really what you need to do if you want to have a machine run well. Any machine, like moto, trophy truck, bike.
Oh, people, it's people see stuff and they're just like, it's the same with high idlers, and people are like, oh, you're going to need 2 chains for that, and you're like, no, it's not that much longer. You know what I mean? But it's just something they have in their head, and it'd be the same thing with the weight thing.
Well, it's kind of the same thing. Like when high idlers came out, everyone was banging on about, oh, that's going to decrease your efficiency massively, like blah, blah, blah. Whereas no one complains about the efficiency decrease in a high idler because it's really negligible.
Yeah.
No, it's a cool project. Like I think there's a lot of room to move with it as well. There's a lot of ideas that we've got with it all. So
yeah, I just love being able to see it. Like as much as it isn't a finished product, I've never thought about backlash from people thinking it's not finished. Because I've always viewed it as you're prototyping, right? But maybe that's just the age of Instagram, right? Where everything's got to be fucking perfect and filtered. But like, it's awesome to see, and surely there's going to be a box going on it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, second to that point, I think like the location that we've got it at the moment, the location we've got at the moment is going to be so much easier to enclose. And without trying to give too much away, like where it is at the moment, you could literally sell that as a caseable item, like, you know, as a case, like kind of like Honda did. And it wouldn't be so far-fetched for frame manufacturers to build around that. You know, and I feel as though
the latest iteration I've seen, where it's real compact. Is that the latest iteration I've seen as well?
Yeah. So we can get a little bit more compact than that again. The real thing that, like, hate to sound like a, you know, over the top, but like I really wanted to crack down on the angles and stuff. Like, I'm big, and like Nigel, like engineered to slightly, like he's big on this too. Like I love looking at cafe races and classic cars and whatever. And I think the thing that like makes them good are the angles. And like this thing, if you look at the video, like the way that I've done it is that the chain, so the top and bottom of the chain are parallel, and they're also parallel with the top tube. So like geometrically it looks right. Yeah. So you can, I made it way more compact. Like, don't get me wrong, like I can bring it back probably about another 30 mil, bring it shorter at the front. But the point is then is that you've got to bring stuff down, and like geometrically it looks a little bit wacky. And I don't want to sound like the form versus function type thing, but like there is a bit to it of that.
Oh, 100%.
You know,
it's the same thing I was saying before we started with the Forbidden, right? Like before steep seat tubes were a thing, I was like, ooh, not into that bike. And it was only aesthetics. Like the function of it's amazing, but it's obviously it's always gonna come into play. I think it's good you've taken it into account. Yeah, it's so neat. I just keep watching it on repeat. Like, especially compared to the first one.
Compared to the first one, yeah. Like the funny thing was that the first one, like I was kind of pretty stoked on the first one. I was real stoked on the first one, and then as soon as I had that idea of the second one, I was like, oh shit, I look like a dickhead. Like that first one, it's shit. Like scrap the whole thing.
I need to quote something from this actually. So a mate of mine, you probably know him, Darren Paney. He used to work as a mechanic, used to race downhill, rides roads, just a generally awesome guy. But I remember him talking about mountain bike technology once. He's like, someone made something new. I can't remember what it was. And he was like, why didn't they just make that the first time? It was like, no shit. Like it was such a good point. It was so valid, but it was like, because like it can't just happen that way all the time. Like there's always going to be variations and things that get better. But it's funny, like it is easy to look at your old stuff and be like, why didn't they do that first? But it's just like, you're also doing something that really no one else is, like other people done, but not with everyone's knowledge, you know what I mean? So.
Well, I think like, because this is like a common thing within engineering that like me and like, I'm not saying it's not obviously limited just to engineers, but like I talk about with my dad a lot and whatever, is that like I feel as though the funny thing in engineering, and I was only saying it to someone today, but like and it kind of seems to be multidisciplinary too, but like things advance to become simpler, like you just said. Like when reiterations, instead of adding stuff, a lot of stuff is stripped away. It becomes more simple. And you look at that with like a whole heap of things, like whether it's, I don't know, valves in cars or like whatever. It's like why didn't we think of this earlier? And there's that narrative to it. It's like you make things complicated and then you start to think about, well, what can we take away to still make it work? But I think the bigger thing to that is really machining capability. Like there are things that you look at now, like, why didn't we just make that to begin with? And it's like, well, you didn't have the access to the raw materials or to the machines, or like, you had to make it a workaround way because you had to, make it out of cast stuff or whatever. So I think that's where things really have come a long way, sort of. Yeah, I mean, with everything engineering, but, bike industry included.
Well, you can't just go bolt that onto a carbon frame. You'd have to have, if you're a bike company, you'd have to make a mule, which is effectively what you've got, which is, a big expense. And then you've got to deal with whichever the OEM companies are. We're going to make this. And they'd be like, well, we don't really want you to do this. We want you to do this. So there's a whole more complexity to it than if you're just running what you've got as well. I think it's another factor to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to that point even is, sorry, I'm fucking around here. To that point is even what I was saying about access. Like this whole project, honestly, would have been too much of a pain in the ass to do with a cable. Like I just wouldn't have done it. Like the time it would have taken to make reiterations and whatever with a cable, just be like, fuck that. Like you could do what Honda did and design the bike around knowing exactly where you need stuff to make it work, and you'd make it work. But when people say, oh, why didn't we do that before? It's like, well, like I was just saying, it's, it seems simple, but one of the reasons it's so simple is having access to something like Axis, just to, bolt shit randomly all over the joint.
Oh, it's so easy. I was saying to someone at an event the other week, and all my bikes are Axis now. And it's just because I've wasted so much of my time putting cables and things, and I'm over it. And it just makes my life easier now.
100%. The first time I saw Axis, I was like, yeah, this is going to change the world. It's unreal. So I've kind of off the topic, but I think I might be able to show it a little bit better. I've been fucking around. I pulled apart one of my Sprag clutches and I've reassembled it. So I've taken the bearing out, all that. But that's I don't know if you can see that. Kind of. If you can see where the ramps are. So I'm trying to get this so you can see it. But long story short, so it'll rotate that way. But it's
crazy how instant it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on, dude. The flex that you can see is my fingers. There's nothing. It's on or it's off. You can't see it through the thing. I can see it. You can see really closely. When it backstops, you can see the cams stand up. And that's why the tolerance is. Yeah, that's why the tolerance is so important. So it'll run freely, just like a bearing. And again, I pulled the bearing out of this, so it's not bearing supported. So with the bearing support, is that those cams are not even touching. So it'll well, barely touching, but it'll run just on the bearing, and then when you go to pedal, it'll grab.
So good. I need one in my life.
I swore I'd never pull that apart in public, but there you go.
I'm excited for this road project I'm doing. I'll chat to you about it because it's going to be sick. For the handmade show.
Do you want to chat to me about it after this, just real quick? Because I'm keen.
Yeah.
But apologies. This has felt like a very self-centered chat. But
about the CentreHub. Anyway. It can't be anything else but self-centered, mate.
And I really wanted to talk about it, to be honest. I had Googled what a Sprag Clutch is, but it wasn't. There's not really explanations that work like that. There's videos online which kind of talk through what you're doing with the cams, but not in the sense of this is the path that is. It was hard to conceptualize, so it's good.
Yeah, for sure. I think. I think I was going to go out on a limb and say I think they're going to become more popular. I don't know, maybe if the CentreHub becomes really popular, but I think they're a no-brainer. Like I said, that the reason why I think the uptake is a little bit limited really is because of the expense, and the expense is because of the manufacturing tolerances and whatnot. Hopefully hopefully we can get it down. And
I think the price is fair. I know I've talked to you about price a bit. Like, first of all, it's a really niche product. It's also the first few batches are early adopters, right? It's always going to be more money because it's setting the thing up. But if you compare that to some nice hubs, and then now you know how to spend the money on those hubs, maybe you just buy some cheaper hubs and get some nice bearings for them. I just dropped $1,500 on Kings like a few months ago. You know what I mean? Beautiful hubs. But I would just buy cheaper hubs now and get that and have better engagement and other attributes.
Yeah. I think price is all relative. I'm a very sort of agreeable person by nature. So I really, I'm not trying to sound like trying to be Mr. Nice Guy or anything here, but I really struggle to ask people for money, struggle.
I'm the same, even with my workshop, man. I'm so bad at it.
Yeah. And again, some people might say my stuff is on the expensive side, but it's relative to making any profit off it to put back into R&D. It's on the limit of,
yeah.
Dude,
you're not driving around in Lambos. You know what I mean? If anyone's looking at that and thinking it's anything more than a passion project, I'm not saying it's a business, but it is obviously what you're passionate about. It's not like you're retiring early and living on an island.
Yeah. I'm still working full time that way. So.
Exactly. So it is expensive, but it's also bikes are expensive. I could drop way more money on way more useless stuff on my bike.
The other thing is, there's carbon wheel companies that ask almost $8,000 a wheel set.
Yeah, Zip for road make $8,000 wheels. You know what I mean? You can spend way more money on other stuff. This might not be the item for everybody, but if you could save some money on some hub, it'll just change your purchasing decisions later on. If you're buying wheels later on, you may be I don't know, for some cheaper hubs, and you just change your buying habits, and it wouldn't really, at the end of the day, alter the build too much.
For sure.
Sweet. Might ask some listener questions if that's cool.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about them. Yeah.
One's from Mr. Zach, 1980. What can gearbox manufacturers do differently to increase market share?
To increase market share?
Sell yourself to one of the big bike brands, drivetrain companies.
Pretty sure SRAM made the first gearbox, right? Technically, the internal gear.
I don't know. Sachs, I think that original design. I don't know if it was the first. Maybe you'd probably know more than me on that.
I don't know. Look, there's either two ways around it, and I'm not trying to come at I'm no expert. I don't want to sound like an economist here or anything, but there's two ways, in my opinion, to do it. One is, and the two kind of feed into one another, but I'll say them separately. One is Lockie was just saying, is you sell out to a big manufacturer and get them to develop it, and not just develop it, have them push it. I feel as though there'll be market share. There'd be a lot of people who would buy it if SRAM sold it because SRAM were telling you it was the best. People would just buy it because they trust SRAM. Whereas I think from a boutique manufacturer, Pinion's getting a little bit bigger, I think, but they're still taking a big punt on a lesser known brand of their claims. So I think that's one which kind of feeds into, and the two are kind of separated but also similar, is just make a better product. If it's a good product, it doesn't matter whether you're SRAM or a boutique guy. If it's a good product, it's a good product, and there's no arguing about it.
I think the big limiting thing as well for your design is using pre-made parts, but bolted onto the frame. Most frames need to be gearbox specific frames. I think that's the most limiting thing. Now the Trinity bike, where you could put in the crankset, standard crankset, and convert it to both. I think that's what's going to have to happen from bikes, really, for it to be widespread, where people have a choice, because people just aren't going to lock themselves into a gearbox. I don't think at this stage, unless, because some people talk about serviceability on bikes, and it just takes all of that away. You're going to have to send that thing off to someone to service it.
Yeah, I think, and this is such a multifaceted thing, but like, I'll kind of go down that track and say that, like, I think personally, and I'm not necessarily saying it's got to be a standard. Whether it worked out as a standard, then I guess good. But I think from an engineer ergonomic point of view, I think that bolt-in bottom brackets / bolt-in gearboxes should be a thing. Something that I'm only launching tomorrow, so I can say it here, is that bolt-in bottom bracket that I'm selling, which is also going to be spec'd on Trinity, is that I've set up a whole custom bottom bracket drop for that, so you can request what bottom bracket drop you want.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is super powerful. I'm like, why the fuck aren't more companies doing this? Like, if you had a bolt-in bottom bracket, depending on track or riding preference or whatever, you could be like, hey, I want to drop my bottom bracket a couple of mil, but it's not going to affect anything else on the bike. It's not going to affect suspension kinematics or anything. So I feel as though from an engineering point of view, I think that bolt-in bottom brackets / bolt-in gearboxes almost should be a thing.
I definitely need to talk about custom geometry at another stage with you on this, because I think there's a whole host of stuff with that. But yeah, I think if there's a standard around it, that'll be a thing. If you can have a system where you've got the gearbox, say your gearbox shit the bed, and hopefully it doesn't shit the bed, right? But say you need to get service or whatever, and then you can chuck in your normal crankset just to ride in the meantime, and then chuck it back in and you're going again. That's going to be the biggest thing. Once that's going, I think gearboxes can have the potential to get bigger. But until that point, if you're locked into that with a small brand, it's too hard. I remember dealing with roll-off like 10 years ago at bike shops. And it was a pain in the ass, like amazingly made things, beautiful hubs. But there was just some old dude who had a home set up servicing them, and it could take ages. So
yeah, I think, like, to answer the question again, like from this point of view, I think there are a couple of things. And one is, like, if gearboxes want more of a market share, like, it comes back to that thing about building quality product, is that, like, at the moment, I'm not saying they're not a quality product, because they are, like, they're fantastic, like, they're like clockwork. But then, just plainly and simply, they're not efficient enough. And I don't mean that in any negative connotation, but, like, with bikes, you're dealing with such limited wattage, is that if you're losing only 1% more than what you would with a standard chain drivetrain, then you're just not going to run a gearbox. Like, why would you?
Yeah.
So it really, I think, if they wanted to increase their market share, is that you've got to get away from a traditional gearbox rack of gears and sitting in a bath of oil, because it's like they've got their advantages. I'm not saying that they don't, but in my opinion, like, you've got to set out a level of hierarchy with what's really important for the bike rider. And number one, overwhelmingly, is efficiency. You're just not going to ride something that zaps power.
Well, if you really boil it down, the only benefit I can think of a gearbox, the main benefit is, there's obviously unsprung weight and stuff, but like the main one is you don't have a derailleur to hit off your bike.
Yep.
I can't think of much else that's really big. How often do you guys hit your derailleur off your bike?
Well, and this is the thing, like, if it's a way up between efficiency and whacking the derailleur off the bike, I'm going to take efficiency every day of the week, because you can whack the derailleur off the bike. It's not, of course it's doable. But the thing is, like, I'll take the efficiency.
Yeah. I'm really keen to see gearboxes happen more on e-bikes. I think they are needed 100% on e-bikes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the gearbox e-bike thing will be the next thing we see, for sure.
Yeah, the traditional drivetrain is just not the best way for those forward, because there's so much power going through. Like, you're pretty much doing the power that, I wouldn't say a pro roadie, but like an elite road racer would do consistently on that thing all the time, and I don't think that's a good thing. So yeah, I think e-bikes will spur that on.
Yeah. My answer is that once the cassette chain and derailleur overlords fall from underneath the Illuminati and the gearbox revolution rises up, which is apparently an actual conspiracy theory within the bike industry.
Honestly, every time I read something about people who are on the gearbox train, they do read like that. It's like it's a conspiracy. They're hiding these efficient gearboxes from us. I'm like, I don't think that's the case.
I believe it. From the best Instagram name ever, what a flog. When's the do you have plans for the Trinity box to go 12 speed?
Yes.
Yep. Cool.
Would you go? Well, this is SRAM related, but would you go Eagle or would you go the gravel cassette with tighter jumps? Or you can't talk about it.
Well, all I'm going to say is it's under patent.
Okay, cool. Fine.
So I can't talk about it.
Fine.
He's actually going to have 6 gears and then 6 gears. That's 36 gears, right? So my math is great.
Yeah, that's a big range. That's big range.
Do that. Can you do that anyway? But you're going to make them all the same step. So essentially it's going to be 6 gears anyway. And someone asked if they haven't used these bearings in hubs before, but you answered that.
Yeah, Onyx.
Yeah.
There's another couple using them as well. Sniper are using them. Box, BMX are also using them now. Actually, while we're on the topic, I mentioned roller ramp clutches earlier. I've got a cool story about roller ramp clutches. Unfortunately, Stealth, who use the roller ramp in BMX, have gone out of business. Box actually bought Stealth, hence why they're now using roller ramp, funnily enough. Yeah. But Stealth, it's funny how the bike industry works. But so what happened was, and I know this because I've visited the Stealth factory, is Chris King. So the story goes that Chris King used to be in California, and then when they moved up to Oregon, there was a bunch of employees at Chris King that didn't want to make the move to Oregon for obvious reasons. They were based in California and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was Chris King moved on up to Oregon, and then the company that bought the Chris King shop were a company called True Precision, and True Precision make titanium implants, like medical implants and whatever. So super, hence the name, super precise instruments, like measuring instruments, but also implants and all that type of stuff. And they took over the old Chris King factory. Now, what happened was they inherited a lot of the old Chris King employees because a lot of the employees wanted to stay in California and said, well, we'll just swing over to the new company and make medical implants instead of bike products. Now, what happened was all of a sudden you've got these medical implant and instrument guys working for you that are bike geeks, and they said, hey, can we start this company called Stealth on the side using all your machines and whatever, because we reckon we can make a better product than Chris King. Mm-hmm. So you had all these ex-Chris King guys who are now Stealth, and that's why Stealth are no longer anymore, but Stealth was Stealth, and then underneath it was by True Precision, and True Precision was the medical company. Yeah. Because all these guys sat around the tea room at Chris King saying, we want a roller ramp, we want a roller ramp. And Chris was like, nah, we're staying with the ratchet. So as soon as they weren't with Chris King, they did the roller ramp. And obviously Box has bought that now. But anyway, that's a fun little story about Stealth and Chris King.
All right. I like those stories.
That was cool. Yeah. I like that type of stuff. And last question. I feel like we have to answer this one. It's so good. But what if your foreskin gets caught in the gears, mate?
Well, I'm not long enough to reach that far. That's all I'm going to say.
I told Charlie to see a doctor before he rides if it's that big of a problem.
Yeah.
I test rode a bike once, and I didn't say that, but it was like, what if I get caught in that? And I actually did. So I think it's a fair question, but there's going to be something covering it. So I didn't mean it in like a phallic way getting caught. My leg actually got caught in it. It was a gross bike. But yeah, I found that question really funny.
Definitely not question of the episode, but it was good. All right. Thanks. It was great. It was like the first question too. He's always got the first question. So thanks, Charlie.
No, he's a good dude. He's always engaged with everything I'm doing and the podcast or whatever. So I enjoy it.
He's a good man.
He's
got a forbidden now, doesn't he? On that topic.
Norco.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Norco.
Yeah, he's got a range, I think.
Norco ambassador, I'm pretty sure now. So
moving up in the world.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, guys. It's been great. My head is melted. So you've done.
Yeah, I'm a little bit fried. There'll definitely be something that I've forgotten to mention about the hub, but that's all good. We'll mention it at some point once I get a schematic going. Yeah, that's right.
There'll probably be a bunch of messages asking about it. Yeah.
Rad. I'm going to roll as well. I'll talk to you about this road bike another time.
All right, man. Easy, done. But I'm very, very excited. I want to be involved in any way I can be.
Yeah. No, it's going to be sick. It's going to be sick. Excited.
There we go, guys. That was the latest episode of Tech Talk. Thanks so much for coming in on that one and enjoying it. And I hope you got a bunch of information. Mick is an absolute lord, and man, he can talk forever when it comes to his stuff, which I was super glad to hear about. Hope you were too. As usual, thanks to our supporters, To Up Bike Co, FE Sports, Frank Mountain Bike Apparel, NS Dynamics, Tailored Trails, Dirt Surfer, Crush and Fist, and of course Lead Out Sports. So Mr. Zach 1980, you're the winner of the best question at this one, so give us a yell and we'll get that voucher out to you. Don't forget, if you want to ask a question and it's a good one, you can go on the chance to win $100 worth of Pedro's kit from Lead Out Sports. Anyway, we'll move on to the next one soon. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to share it around with all your mates, and we'll speak soon.